The marble hall wasn't built for silence, but for spectacle. Tonight it delivered both. A string quartet played in the far corner, their notes weaving through chandeliers that threw judgmental light across the gala. Diamonds glittered, tuxedos gleamed, and in the center of it all, chaos cracked open. "Get out of here!" The words shot like a gavel, sharp and final. They came from an elderly matriarch, draped in black silk, her pearl necklace trembling with fury. Her arm cut through the air, a hand raised not for balance but for humiliation. And it landed open palm across the cheek of the tall black CEO standing opposite her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman in navy clutched her phone tighter, recording. A man in yellow froze mid-sip, champagne spilling onto marble tiles. Even the statues carved along the walls seemed to lean in, witnesses to something ugly. But the CEO, she didn't flinch. She didn't stagger. She stood rooted, a midnight figure carved in poise. She lifted one hand slowly, brushing her cheek as if she'd been touched by nothing more than dust. Her gaze locked forward, steady, unyielding. The matriarch hissed again, closer this time. "You don't belong in this hall. This is a place for real power." Her voice cracked like glass under strain. Behind her, a younger man in a cobalt tuxedo stepped forward, lips curled. "Security will handle this. People like her always try to slip in." His tone carried the smugness of ownership, but his eyes darted toward the growing circle of phones. The CEO remained silent, arms crossed, chin lifted. Silence wasn't surrender, it was the sharpest blade in the room. Murmurs thickened. "Did she just slap her?" whispered a woman in emerald. Another guest muttered, "Who even is she?" Fingers tapped screens. Hashtags were already being born in the shadows of Twitter and TikTok. And then, the first shift. A reporter, barely out of journalism school, raised her phone high. Her voice trembled but held. "I'm recording. Everyone needs to see this." The matriarch's face twisted. "Turn that off." But the reporter didn't. And in that moment, power began to slip. The CEO's eyes swept the hall. She saw fear masquerading as elegance, arrogance dressed as heritage. And she remembered a boardroom 2 decades ago. Another man in a silk tie who told her she wasn't polished enough for funding. That rejection had seeded a billion-dollar empire. Now, here she stood, struck in front of hundreds. Same tone, same dismissal, different outcome. She unfolded her arms at last. The quartet faltered, strings screeching into silence. Her voice, low and steady, filled the hall. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to her." She turned her gaze back to the matriarch, eyes gleaming not with tears but with fire contained. "You made a mistake tonight, and it won't be mine to regret." The gala had been designed to impress. Marble columns stretched high as if holding up the night sky itself. Spotlights swept across gowns the color of champagne, jewels that winked like they carried secrets. To the untrained eye, it was elegance distilled. To her, it was camouflage. The black CEO walked into this hall knowing exactly how it would unfold. She had chosen her armor deliberately. A dress cut in obsidian silk, simple, unbranded, with no glittering logo to announce status. No entourage, no husband on her arm, no cluster of assistants whispering schedules. Just her, alone. It was always better this way, better to see people's true faces before they realized who was standing in front of them. She paused near the base of the staircase, scanning the room. The billionaire family hosting tonight's gala basked in attention like royalty at a coronation. Guests orbited them, donors, lobbyists, politicians desperate for favor. And at the center, the matriarch herself, silver hair sharp as a crown, commanding like a monarch. They had no idea the guest they had just struck was the reason the gala even existed. The billion-dollar deal scheduled for midnight? It was her company's money. The family needed it more than oxygen, but they couldn't see beyond the dress. They couldn't see beyond the skin. A server brushed past, offering her a flute of champagne. She declined with a faint smile. Alcohol dulled the senses, and tonight she needed clarity razor sharp. Across the hall, the young man in the cobalt tuxedo whispered to his mother. His lips formed words the CEO had seen 1,000 times. "Doesn't fit in, doesn't belong here." He laughed too loudly, like confidence could hide fear. And in that moment, a memory surged. 20 years ago, She had walked into a conference room in Chicago. She had worn her best suit then, clutching a folder of proposals. The banker across the table never opened it. He glanced at her skin, her hands, the plain shoes she could afford. "Not the image we're looking for," he'd said. That humiliation burned, but it also ignited. Now, standing inside the grandest hall in the city, she felt that same fire, and she realized nothing had changed, except her. Phones were still raised, recording. Whispers tangled like smoke across marble. Some guests edged closer, not out of sympathy, but curiosity. Scandal was entertainment, and entertainment was currency. She let them watch. She wanted them to, because when the truth landed, their faces would matter more than her words. In the corner, the string quartet struck another note, hesitant, as if unsure whether to keep playing. The Gala program listed the highlight of the evening, a ceremonial signing, a billion-dollar partnership to be toasted under the chandeliers. Guests believed it was the family's triumph. But the reality? The ink would dry only with her consent. Her assistant was 3 blocks away, seated in a hotel suite with files prepared. Protocols waiting. One call from her, and the deal could shift, collapse, or simply vanish. But for now, she stayed silent, poised, watching. Because the cruelest truth about power is this: it's invisible until it isn't. The sting of the slap hadn't faded, but the silence it left behind was sharper than pain. Every eye in the hall tracked her, as if the chandeliers themselves had tilted their light to mark her out. For a second, she considered saying nothing, letting them choke on their own arrogance. But the choice was stolen. Security. The word cracked across the room like a whip. The matriarch's son, the one in the cobalt tuxedo, raised his hand high. He didn't shout because he needed to, he shouted because he wanted the humiliation amplified. "Escort this woman out. Now." A murmur surged. Guests shifted. Dresses swished. Heels clicked against marble. A ripple of discomfort, but not dissent. Not yet. The CEO didn't move. She clasped her hands in front of her, shoulders squared, posture rooted like stone. Silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. The son sneered. "Do you even know where you are? This isn't some charity ball you can wander into. This is legacy." He tugged his lapels as if the fabric itself granted authority. From the corner, a woman in emerald whispered, "Legacy? Or theft dressed in pearls?" Her friend elbowed her, but the words lingered, caught by more than one recording phone. The matriarch stepped closer, voice cutting. "You were never invited. You think walking in with that dress makes you one of us?" She gestured to the floor, to the scattered fragments of the invitation they had torn minutes earlier. Fraud. Fraud. The word hung heavier than crystal. A guard in black uniform appeared from the edge of the hall, drawn by the call. His eyes darted between the matriarch, her son, and the woman standing motionless in their orbit. He hesitated. That hesitation mattered. Phones glinted in his vision. Cameras rolled. The son barked again, louder. "Don't just stand there, remove her." The CEO tilted her head slightly, not at him, but at the crowd. At the dozen guests who had stopped pretending to sip champagne, who now openly recorded. At the young reporter in navy, lips tight, camera steady. She remembered another moment, years back, when security had been called on her at a bank for trying to withdraw her own money. That memory coiled with this one, merging into the same venom. Different room. Same story. But tonight, she wasn't 23 with no leverage. Tonight, she owned the table they thought she was begging to sit at. Another guard appeared, this one more eager, already adjusting his earpiece. "Ma'am, you'll need to step outside." His voice was rehearsed, neutral, but the bias was baked in. She didn't move, didn't blink. She only let the silence stretch until the tension hummed like an electrical wire ready to snap. The matriarch smiled, thin and cruel. "See? She won't even defend herself, because she can't." But that was the mistake. Because silence was not surrender, it was strategy. And when she finally spoke, the words didn't rise in anger. They fell like verdicts. "You should have thought twice before turning this into a stage, because every stage has an audience." The crowd stirred. A few clapped, uncertain but compelled. The guards froze, caught between command and conscience. And for the first time, the billionaire family looked uneasy. The escalation had begun, and it wasn't hers to fear. It was theirs. The guards waited for her to move. She didn't. Instead, The black CEO stood in the very center of the marble floor, spine straight, hands folded loosely at her waist. Not defiant, not submissive, simply immovable. The chandeliers above flickered in their crystals, casting light across her face. One cheek still bore the red bloom of the slap, but she treated it like it wasn't even there. The son in the cobalt tuxedo smirked, mistaking her stillness for fear. See? Nothing to say. He gestured at the crowd, sweeping his hand like a ringmaster. She doesn't belong here. Everyone knows it. But not everyone agreed. A low murmur rose from the edges. Someone whispered, "Why hasn't she said a word?" Another muttered, "She looks calmer than they do." Phones shifted angles. Lenses zoomed in. The spectacle was recording itself. The matriarch leaned forward, pearls trembling against her chest. "Answer me." Her voice cut sharp, bouncing against the marble walls. "Who do you think you are?" Still, no reply. The CEO's silence was louder than their accusations. She inhaled once, slow and measured, her eyes scanning the room not in panic, but in calculation. Every guest, every phone, every flicker of unease on the guards' faces, she saw it all. The younger guard shifted uneasily, lowering his hand from her arm. He didn't know why, but the air told him not to touch her. The matriarch grew louder, desperate to regain control. "You hear me? Answer." She finally moved. Not her lips, her eyes. She lifted them from the floor to the chandelier, then to the crowd, then back to the matriarch. The stare was surgical, dissecting. The hall quieted without command. And then she smiled. Small, controlled, dangerous. The son frowned, confused. "What's so funny?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Because she knew what they didn't. Silence cracks arrogance faster than shouting ever could. And the cracks were already spreading. Guests exchanged looks, unsure. A woman in emerald muttered, "She's not panicking." "Why not?" A man in gray whispered back, "Because she doesn't have to." In the corner, the string quartet stopped pretending to play. Their bows hovered in the air, waiting for permission that would never come. The reporter in navy whispered to her phone, "She hasn't spoken once, but it feels like she's the only one in control." The live stream comments scrolled in real time. "She's fearless." They looked nervous, not her. "Wait, who is she?" The matriarch snapped, voice cracking. "Enough of this." She pointed again. "Get her out." But the guards hesitated. Cameras glared at them like juries. One shifted back a step, shaking his head slightly. And in that pause, the CEO finally moved her lips. One sentence, low, deliberate, impossible to ignore. "Sometimes silence says more than your entire legacy." The words cut deeper than any scream. The crowd rippled. The sun stiffened. And for the first time that night, the billionaire family felt the weight of losing control. The silence didn't last long. It never does when phones are watching. From the left side of the hall, the young reporter in navy stepped forward. Her camera was already raised, its red light glowing like an accusation. Her voice trembled at first, but found strength as it carried. "I'm documenting this. Everyone needs to see what just happened." The matriarch spun, fury etched in every line of her face. "Put that away," she barked, pearls shaking as if even they recoiled. "This is private property." But it wasn't private anymore, not with dozens of phones angled high, their lenses catching every syllable, every movement. The gala had become a courtroom, the chandeliers a spotlight, the guests unwilling jurors. A man in a charcoal suit near the buffet table cleared his throat. His voice was hesitant, but it cut the air. "Why are you calling security if she hasn't done anything?" All heads turned. The son sneered. "Because she's not supposed to be here, can't you see that?" The man frowned. "All I see is a woman standing calmly while you scream in her face." His words weren't loud, but the phones picked them up. His doubt became evidence. Another voice rose, this one from the back. A woman in emerald green, the same who had whispered earlier, now spoke louder, shaking but resolute. "I don't think she's the one embarrassing this family tonight." The crowd stirred. Some gasped, some clapped nervously. The matriarch snapped her head toward the woman. "Sit down before I have you removed as well." But the damage was done. Witnesses had spoken. The reporter in navy adjusted her angle, capturing both the billionaire family and the silent CEO in one frame. "Viewers," she whispered into her mic, "you're watching this live from the city's largest gala, A black woman has just been slapped and accused of trespassing by the hosts. She hasn't raised her voice once. The live stream chat exploded. Unbelievable. She's too calm. Something's up. Expose them. What's her name? The guards shifted uneasily. They weren't trained for audiences this large. One tugged his collar, muttering, "This is getting out of hand." The CEO still hadn't moved. Her silence, paired with the witnesses' voices, had turned the tide. Now it wasn't just her versus the family. It was them versus the room. A guest near the piano lifted his phone higher and said it plainly, "If she's not supposed to be here, prove it. Show the guest list." The son's jaw clenched. "We don't need to explain ourselves." But suddenly, they did, because every second of silence from their side became louder proof that the accusations weren't built on truth, they were built on bias, and the witnesses knew it. The CEO finally allowed herself a small breath, not relief, preparation, because she understood the rhythm of injustice. First the slap, then the lies, then the witnesses, and after that the reckoning. She glanced at the reporter's phone, the screen glowing bright in the dim hall. She didn't nod, didn't speak, but the message was clear. Let them record. Let the world see. The crowd was shifting, the narrative was slipping, and the billionaire family, for the first time, looked cornered. The crowd's murmur had become a steady hum, like an engine about to roar. Every guest, every camera, every sideways glance, all of it pressed down on the family that once commanded the room. And pressure breeds mistakes. The matriarch's husband finally stepped forward. He had remained silent until now, towering in his tailored tuxedo, posture rigid with the kind of entitlement that doesn't bend, it breaks others. His voice dropped, slow and deliberate, designed to cut deeper than the slap had. "She is nothing but an intruder," he declared, his hand sweeping toward the CEO as though brushing away dust. No invitation, no heritage, no claim, just a face that wandered into a place it does not deserve. The words echoed like a verdict. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Phones caught every syllable. Still, the CEO didn't flinch. Her silence remained her sharpest weapon, and it unsettled him. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough to escape microphones. "You've embarrassed yourself in front of real power tonight. Walk out quietly, and maybe they'll forget you were here." A gasp rose from the left. Someone whispered, "Did he just say real power?" The phrase hissed through the crowd, toxic and undeniable. The son seized the moment, stepping beside his father. His tone was sharper, reckless, feeding off adrenaline. "You all saw it. She came in here uninvited. She's pretending to be someone she's not. Look at her, look at that dress. No woman of means shows up like that." He let the words hang, dripping with insult. The emerald-dressed woman from earlier scoffed loudly enough to be heard. "So wealth is measured in sequins now?" Laughter rippled short, nervous, but real. The matriarch snapped her head, desperate. "Enough of these distractions. Guards, take her outside." One of the guards stepped forward again, but slower this time. The camera lights pinned him in place, every move scrutinized. He hesitated, waiting for an order with less risk. The husband's face reddened, his control slipping. "This hall belongs to legacy, not to imposters, not to people like her." That phrase landed heavier than the slap. People like her. Guests exchanged sharp glances. A man near the bar muttered, "We all heard that." Another whispered, "This isn't about trespassing. This is about race." The son bristled, realizing the shift. "Don't twist it. She doesn't belong here, that's all." But the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. Doubt had turned to recognition. Phones weren't just recording, they were judging. The CEO finally lifted her chin a fraction higher, meeting the husband's glare with quiet steel. She still didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because every second she held her silence, their desperation grew louder. The matriarch's hand trembled against her pearls. The husband's jaw locked. The son's voice cracked as he tried to command guards who no longer obeyed. What began as an attempt to erase her presence had backfired. Now, the erasure was theirs. And the night wasn't done breaking them. The hum of the crowd swelled until it felt like the chandeliers themselves were vibrating. The family, once untouchable, now looked cornered. And when people like them feel trapped, they lash out. The son moved first. With a theatrical flick of his hand, he stooped down and snatched a slip of paper from the marble floor, the torn remnants of the Gala invitation. He held it up for everyone to see, his grin a sneer. "This," he said loudly, This proves nothing. Anyone can print an invitation. Watch. He tore it in half, then into quarters. Paper fragments rained like confetti, falling at the CEO's feet. His voice rose over the gasp of the audience. No proof, no place, no presence here. The matriarch followed, her rage sharpening into cruelty. She jabbed a finger at the CEO's chest, just short of contact, her pearls clattering as though even they trembled. You think you can stand here in silence and make us look like fools? You are the fool. You have no seat at this table, no name that matters. The husband stepped in, voice dropping low but heavy enough to reach the corners of the room. Enough of this charade. Call the police. He turned to the guard nearest him. Report an intruder. Let the authorities remove her before she causes more damage. The word police sliced the air. Guests stiffened. Several phones zoomed in closer. The reporter in navy whispered into her mic. They're threatening to call law enforcement on a guest at their own gala. Her live stream comments erupted. This is racial profiling in real time. They're digging their own grave. The older guard's face paled. He tapped his earpiece, hesitant. Sir, are you certain? His voice betrayed him, uncertainty, layered over fear of public backlash. The husband's roar cut through him. Do it! Now! But the guard didn't move. Cameras pressed in closer, hundreds of digital eyes turning the gala into a trial. The son, panicked at the hesitation, lunged closer to the CEO. His hand brushed the sleeve of her dress, a gesture meant to push her toward the exit. The crowd gasped as one. A woman cried out, "Don't touch her!" Phones shook with sudden movement, the incident magnified in every feed. The CEO didn't flinch, didn't recoil. She simply looked at his hand, then back at his face, her expression unreadable. And in that stillness, the hall fractured. Guests whispered fiercely now, no longer hiding their judgment. This isn't security, this is assault. They're destroying themselves. The matriarch's voice cracked, shrill with desperation. Remove her. But the power had shifted. The guards stalled, the crowd leaned in, and the cameras caught everything. The billionaire family had crossed a line. They hadn't just insulted her. They had tried to erase her entirely. And the room knew it. The crowd had seen enough. Gasps still hung in the air from the son's shove. Fragments of paper still littered the marble. The family's fury had reached its loudest pitch, and yet the only sound that mattered now was silence. Because silence was about to end. The CEO reached into the small clutch at her side. Slow, measured, every eye followed. For a heartbeat, the family thought it was retreat, perhaps an ID, some futile proof to beg for acceptance. But what she drew out wasn't a document. It was a phone. One tap, the screen lit up. She lifted it to her ear. Her voice was calm, steady, lower than the chandeliers but heavier than the entire orchestra could have been. Protocol 1. Initiate. The words weren't loud, but the microphones picked them up. The reporter's stream captured every syllable. The chat exploded. What's Protocol 1? She planned for this. Wait. She's in control. On the other end, 3 blocks away in a hotel suite, her assistant answered immediately. Understood. Logging timestamp now. Systems engaged. The voice, crisp and professional, carried through the speaker just enough for those nearby to hear. The son froze. His smirk faltered. What is this? She didn't answer him. She never looked his way. Her gaze swept the hall, settling on no one in particular, yet striking everyone at once. Then she lowered the phone. The matriarch barked. What games are you playing? Still calm, still steady. The CEO replied, This is not a game, this is documentation. Oh. The husband stepped forward, voice strained. You think calling your friend will save you? We own this city. We decide who sits at the table. The CEO's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Do you, or have you mistaken noise for power? A stir ran through the guests. Whispers grew teeth. She's not bluffing. Protocol? Systems? What's she talking about? Her assistant's voice buzzed again through the phone. Confirmation. Live stream mirrors are syncing. Files attached to incident record. Ready for escalation. The hall went still. Guests blinked, realizing they weren't just witnesses anymore. They were evidence. The son's bravado cracked. Turn that off! Now! His voice was too high, too frantic, and the phones caught it. The CEO slipped the phone back into her clutch, as deliberate as drawing a sword and sheathing it again. She spoke not to the family, not even to the guards, but to the air itself. You wanted this to be public. Let it be. The chandeliers seemed to dim as the words settled. For the first time, the billionaire family wasn't sure who the audience was anymore, the 100 guests in the hall or the thousands already watching online. And for the first time, the CEO wasn't silent. She was surgical. The first strike had landed. The room held its breath. Phones floated high like constellations, their tiny red lights blinking judgment. The billionaire family shifted uneasily, but the black CEO stood steady, untouched by panic, untouched by noise. She reached once more for her phone, but this time she didn't raise it to her ear. She held it at her side, as if daring anyone to stop her. Her voice carried, calm but heavy enough to pin every gaze in the hall. "You want to know who I am?" The words landed like a stone dropped in still water. Ripples spread across the marble. The son scoffed, though his voice cracked. "You're no one." She turned to him fully, her stare cutting deeper than the chandeliers overhead. "Then remember this moment. Remember calling no one the chairwoman of the company wiring $1 billion into your family's dying empire." Gasps burst through the room. Phones shook in trembling hands. A champagne flute shattered against the floor, dropped by a guest too stunned to keep hold. The matriarch's face drained of color. "That's a lie," she whispered, but the whisper carried. "You can't be—" The CEO cut her off, her tone sharp, precise, irrefutable. "Check your contract. Check the papers your lawyers begged to rush through. Look at the name on the final line. Mine." The husband staggered half a step, his veneer of command fracturing. "Impossible. We vetted every nothing," she snapped, voice still calm but laced with iron. "You never saw me because you never looked. You assumed power had to wear your face, your jewels, your arrogance. And so, when it stood in front of you, you struck it down." The hall erupted not in applause, not yet, but in disbelief. Guests whispered fiercely, phones scrolled, live stream comments spiraled. "She owns the deal? She's the money?" They slapped the investor? The reporter in Navy, voice shaking, narrated to her stream. "Viewers, we just heard it. She's not a guest. She's the one funding this entire partnership. The very woman they just humiliated." The guards froze, realization dawning. Their hands dropped from their radios. No one dared step closer now. The CEO let the silence return, but this time it belonged to her. She lifted her chin, eyes sweeping the hall like a verdict passed down. "You wanted me out, but this hall, this contract, this empire, you only stand because I allow it." The matriarch's pearls slipped from her neck, the clasp breaking as if even the jewelry rejected her. She bent quickly to clutch them, but the image was seared, power on its knees. The guests began to clap, not loud, not yet, but enough. First a ripple, then a wave. Not for cruelty, not for spectacle, for truth. The family shrank beneath the sound, faces pale, hands trembling. And in the center of the storm, the CEO stood taller than ever. The applause spread like fire on dry grass, hesitant at first, then unstoppable. Phones kept recording, their lenses catching every twitch of fear on the family's faces. What had begun as whispers of doubt now roared as certainty. The matriarch tried to steady herself, clutching her broken pearls in trembling hands. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The microphone of a nearby phone caught only a dry rasp, the sound of authority slipping away. The husband reached for his glass of champagne, but his hand shook too violently. The stem snapped, and golden liquid spilled across his tuxedo. Gasps rippled symbols of control crumbling in plain sight. The son looked around wildly, desperate for support. "Don't listen to her. She's lying." His voice cracked, high-pitched, shrill. It was the sound of someone already defeated. He jabbed a finger at the CEO. "She can't prove any of this." But he was wrong. She didn't have to prove it. The truth had already settled, etched into every shocked expression, every live stream comment flying across screens. A guest in a charcoal suit stepped forward, his phone still raised. "She doesn't need to prove it. You just admitted it when you panicked." The reporter in Navy turned her camera toward the son. "He's unraveling," she whispered to her audience of thousands. "They all are." The guards shifted uneasily, no longer aligned with the hosts. One even moved closer to the CEO, not to restrain her, but as if protecting her. The cameras caught it. The crowd noticed. The narrative was no longer in question. The matriarch finally screamed, shattering what little dignity remained. This is my house. My family built this city. The CEO didn't even look at her. She spoke softly, but the hall carried every word. If this city was built on arrogance, then tonight it begins to rebuild without it. Applause swelled again, louder now, freer. A chant nearly started, cut only by the stunned silence of those who realized they were witnessing history. The husband tried one last gambit, turning to the guests with a forced laugh. Come now, don't be fooled. She's bluffing. But even as he spoke, his voice wavered, thin as paper. No one believed him. The emerald-dressed woman stepped fully forward, defiance sparking in her eyes. She hasn't raised her voice once, and still she commands more respect than you ever did. The crowd erupted. Cheers, claps, a few whistles. The family shrank under the storm. The son's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. His face went pale. The news was already live. Headlines, screenshots, clips from the gala spreading like wildfire across the city. He stammered. It's trending. His voice cracked. They're calling it the slap that cost $1 billion. The husband's knees buckled. The matriarch clutched her pearls tighter, as though she could squeeze dignity back into them. But it was gone. All of it. And at the center of the collapse, the CEO stood serene, untouched by the chaos. Her silence now transformed into something greater than defiance. It was sovereignty. The room had chosen its truth. The clapping died down, but the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Every guest, every guard, every camera now faced only her. The black CEO drew her phone once more. No rush, no flourish, just a single motion, deliberate as a gavel falling. She tapped the screen, lifted it to her lips. Terminate the agreement, she said calmly. Effective immediately. On the other end, her assistant's voice carried clear, crisp, undeniable. Confirmed. Contracts voided. Access revoked. Notifications dispatched to legal and finance. The son staggered. No, you can't. His voice broke, desperation spilling like the champagne at his feet. The matriarch clutched at her pearls, shaking her head violently. You wouldn't dare. But she already had. The CEO lowered the phone and looked directly at them. Her tone was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of judgment. You thought you were throwing me out of your world. In truth, I was carrying yours. The husband's phone buzzed. He fumbled it open, staring in horror at the flood of alerts. Deal canceled, accounts frozen, headlines already breaking. His knees buckled. The tuxedo no armor against collapse. The guests erupted again, not in shock this time, but in vindication. Some clapped, some cheered, others simply nodded. Justice wasn't whispered anymore. It was visible, immediate, irreversible. The family stood hollowed, stripped of the illusion they'd worn like armor. And at the center, the CEO didn't smile, didn't gloat. She only stood steady, the embodiment of quiet power unleashed. The verdict was final. The hall was still shaking with the aftershock of her verdict. Guests whispered into phones, reporters typed furiously, live streams flooded with comments that poured like a tidal wave. The billionaire family, once the center of every orbit, stood pale and broken, clutching scraps of pearls and paper like relics of a past that no longer mattered. But the black CEO didn't move toward them. She didn't need to. Their collapse was complete. She turned instead toward the crowd, the witnesses, the jurors, the audience that had become history's recorders. She let her gaze sweep slowly, deliberately, over every raised phone, every stunned face. And then she spoke. I don't need to raise my voice to prove who I am. You've all seen it. You've all felt it. Power doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't strike from desperation. It simply stands until the truth can no longer be denied. Her words struck heavier than the chandeliers, heavier than the music that would never restart tonight. Silence pressed in, but this silence was reverence, not erasure. She stepped once toward the exit, her heels echoing like drums of judgment. But before the door, she paused, turning her head just enough for her voice to carry back to the family still trembling behind her. You thought you erased me. In reality, you erased yourselves. Tonight, the world watched you strike at dignity and lose everything worth keeping. $1 billion gone in an instant, but what you lost is far greater. You lost respect, and there is no contract in the world that can buy it back. Gasps turned to nods. Nods turned to claps. Claps turned into a rolling thunder of applause. Not the polite clapping of socialites, but the raw eruption of people who had just witnessed justice delivered in real time. The matriarch sank into a chair, pearls slipping through her fingers onto the marble like broken promises. The son buried his face in his hands. The husband stared blankly at the shattered glass at his feet, as if the pieces reflected the empire now slipping from his grasp. And the CEO? She didn't linger. She didn't gloat. She walked through the grand doors, her silhouette framed by the light spilling in from the city beyond. The reporter's voice whispered into her stream, almost reverent. She didn't need security. She didn't need to fight. She just walked out and left them with nothing. The applause followed her into the night, echoing long after the doors closed. And for every witness in that hall, and every stranger watching on their screens, one truth was branded deep. Justice doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in silence, wrapped in dignity, walking calmly away, leaving arrogance in ruins.